Well, thank you. Madam Chair, I want to thank you for your commitment on this. I want to thank Chairman Plum, but also my Republican colleagues, certainly Mr. Guthrie and Kathy McMorris, Roger, my seatmate, who I can't be next to as we confer this morning. But there is probably not more an important issue on the health side than what we're dealing with today. So I really appreciate this hearing, the input of all the members as we work together to try and solve these diseases that impact virtually every single family pretty much every day. And we need to move on and improve on what we were able to do as a committee when I chaired it back in 2016 with 21st Century Cures, when every member of this committee, 53-0, supported that bill. And we now need to take advantage of that time and what we've learned to move forward. So my staff reports that they've received legislative feedback from both the majority and the minority. While I've yet to actually sit down and look at the review since I came back this week, we look forward in the coming days to working with everybody to make sure that Cures 2.0 becomes law. And I want to thank again everybody in the hardworking staffs. Real world evidence. There's been a little talk about that earlier in some of the questions. We know that COVID has taught this Congress a very valuable lesson. And when the chips are down, the agency can work quickly and efficiently in support of product approvals. As we saw, we also know that real world evidence, or as we refer to it as RWE, is going to help the agency improve its decision making. According to the FDA's own website, they quote, "This data holds potential to allow us to better design and conduct clinical trials and studies in the healthcare setting to answer the questions previously thought unfeasible." So for Dr. Allen, with Friends of Cancer Research, Cures 2.0 includes provisions encouraging greater use of RWE to solve for the medical product development and approval problems of today. I'd appreciate your thoughts on one, whether we're utilizing RWE appropriately as much as possible, and your thoughts about the provisions as Chairman DeGette and I introduced 2.0 in that legislation.
Sure. Well, thank you for the question. And first and foremost, we wish you well in your recovery. In terms of the utilization of real-world evidence, I think Dr. Ram highlighted some important points, that there still are methodological advancements that are needed in order to use electronic health data regularly for causal inference around the effect of a drug. But I do think we also should note that the use of real-world evidence is not necessarily a new concept. It's played a very important role in things like monitoring for drug safety and identification of adverse events, hopefully earlier when they can be mitigated and well understood and further characterized through subsequent study. Also in looking at generating evidence about populations that weren't included in clinical trials. And there's a very important role for real-world evidence in the continued advancement of those methodologies to help augment clinical studies and actually can help advance the goals of many of the bills that are being considered today around diversity and inclusion in clinical research.
Well, thank you. Dr. Esham, I'd like to just ask you quickly about the Pasteur Act, which again we included in Cures 2.0. It's going to address, as you know, the problems of drug-resistant bacteria and fungal infections by encouraging new drug development. This bipartisan bill, separate bill, the Ford Act, authored by Reps McCarthy and Schweikert, would in addition improve research in the FDA's focus on fungal drug development. If the goal of Congress was to prevent future pandemics from happening, how would the Pasteur Act help Congress achieve them?
Thank you. So again, we are very supportive of the provisions in the Cure Act that reinforces the importance of Pasteur. As you know, this is one of the leading, antimicrobial resistance, one of the leading causes of deaths globally. Development for treatments for antimicrobial resistance do have unique challenges, and we definitely urge enactment and passage of Pasteur this year to ensure that those policies are enacted that will drive and sustain much needed investment in this space.
Well, thank you. And in my closing seconds, I would ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter signed by over 100 entities calling for the swift passage of the Pasteur and Ford Acts. And with that, Madam Chair, I yield back the balance of my time.